Welcome to the Ordinary Marathoner podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Ordinary Marathoner podcast. My name is Scott. I'll be your host today. Got a great show for you today. Got another great guest. Going to bring him on in just a minute. This episode is sponsored by Forever Home Running, F-U-R-E-V-E-R, fur as in animals. Scott Frassard over there, he was a guest of our podcast, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or so. He's the one that helps us with the Ordinary Marathon. He's a race director. And for our virtual race, he bought the medals, helped us with the t-shirts and distribution, all that kind of great stuff. They got a lot of good stuff going on over there at Forever Home Running. You can check them out. Check out their website, foreverhomerunning.com. Again, F-U-R. And, one of the great things they do is that for everyone who signs up for one of their races, they donate an amount of money to an animal rescue shelter. And just a cause that, everyone can get behind, helping the animals out, can't we? So I just want to give him a shout out right from the get-go. I know it's a little bit of a deviation from the normal show format, but we're going to go with this moving forward. We've got a lot of preparation, I guess, for next year's Ordinary Marathon. We're getting this done way in advance this year. I'm really looking forward to it. And, we have a contest now, a Garmin giveaway. It is open at the moment. We're going to be raffling one off on December 2nd. And all you need to do to be eligible is head on over to our homepage, ordinarymarathoner.com. Check out that right-hand column on your PC, or if you're on your mobile device, just scroll down all the way to the bottom and you see sign up for our newsletter. Throw your email address in there with your name. Those of you who are on the list already, you're already enrolled in the raffle. And, you guys know, we're not going to hound you. We're not Pottery Barn. We're not going to just maul your email inbox with tons of emails. We are, 2 or 3 emails a year last year. And, maybe we'll do 4 or 5 next year. I don't know. But we're not going to crush your email. We just want to, just have a conduit here to get some news out and to maintain contact with you guys if we need it. But, again, we're not going to crush you with emails. I'm not Pottery Barn. And you can always opt out. Don't tell anyone, but you can always opt out if you don't win the Garmin. But go ahead on over there, sign up for our giveaway. We're gonna be doing that over the weekend. I think Sunday. What else we got? We have our YouTube channel, Ordinary Marathoner YouTube channel, where we're gonna post all of the audio for our podcast. You can check that out. We're also doing our video series with Stephanie. We got the trailer up already. Ordinary baby has been born. Ellie D. Ricky, 8 pounds, 5 ounces, 21 inches long. She has a set of pipes you wouldn't believe. But what an amazing experience. I'm gonna have an episode with Stephanie as soon as we get a moment to ourselves. It's like, you guys with kids know how it is when they're first born. It's just, you can't take an eye off them, and they have plans of their own when they're gonna wake up and scream. So it's very difficult for us to plan a podcast, but we're gonna be doing that and recapping the birth of the Ordinary baby. We'll be doing that in an upcoming episode, and very much look forward to that as well. Check out our discussion group over on Facebook. Really great place to hang out and chat with other like-minded runners, whether you are an ultramarathoner or whether you are just starting out, getting up off the couch. We'd love to hear from you. Join the conversations over there. We're doing a challenge now thanks to Mary O'Connell over on our Facebook page, and we're going to try to run 100 miles in December. And for some of you ultramarathoners, that's nothing. And for some of you guys that, that aren't ultramarathoners, it's going to be a little difficult challenge. And maybe some of you guys want to just set the bar lower. Maybe you want to run 50 miles in December, and that's fine too. All that's fine. Now, one thing to remember is that Saturday is December 1st. So that means you get 5 weekends in the month of December. So if you do long runs on the weekend, that's going to help you out getting to 100 miles. In the course of a month. So if you do a 10-mile long run on the weekend, that's 50 miles right there. You just got to come up with 50 more on the other days. It's doable. It's doable, folks. But, I don't think we're going to be publicizing, but it's over on the discussion group right now. That's just kind of what we were talking about lately. And, you can find me over at Twitter at OrdMarathoner. That's O-R-D Marathoner. Follow me there. I'll follow you back. We can get the conversation going on over there as well. All right. And with that, let me bring in today's guest. He is the host of NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and he just wrote a book. It's called The Incomplete Book of Running, a book that I've actually read Most of. Peter, I left out like the last 5 pages, I swear.
Well,
It's been a busy week for
My
me.
wife thinks the last 5 pages are the best because they mention our dogs.
Oh,
So
you know what? I
want
did
to,
read about the dog. I feel like I missed some of the end there. You know, it's been a busy week for me. Peter, by the way, Peter Sagal, let me introduce you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Generally, I say Sagal, just so you know.
Oh, you know, that's so bad of me. I've actually seen...
No, I mean, how often do you get to hear my name said out loud? It's totally fine.
But I watched some of your videos just to make sure I actually did it just to get that. And the videos I watched, it didn't mention your name out loud. So I just was like, I don't know. I just...
It's all right.
So sorry about that, Peter. Listen, I wanted to, before we even get talking, I do want to thank you for being flexible. You know, we had scheduled a podcast last week, and I know we scheduled a few weeks ago. On that day, my wife was due sort of 2 or 3 days before we scheduled the podcast, and wouldn't you know it, the night before we scheduled the podcast, she started having contractions, and you are the first post-baby guest to the Ordinary Marathoner podcast.
I'm hoping your sleep deprivation will make this an even more interesting conversation than it might have been otherwise.
Yeah, I'm going to stumble and trip.
On your new daughter, right? You had your wife gave birth to a daughter.
I did. Ellie Ricky, 8 pounds, 5 ounces. She, you know, my first daughter was Samantha. She was 5 pounds, 6 ounces. And when she would cry, it was almost cute and sweet. This one, she has got a set of pipes on her, wakes up the neighborhood, I tell you. And, it's been difficult to get that sleep. So if I stumble over my words a little bit here and there, you got to forgive me.
I understand.
So, and you know, I was actually going to say that too. Is that you and I, when I read your book, you and I actually have a lot of parallels in sort of how we got involved. Or for you, I think it was more sort of stepping up your game when it comes to running. Our families are the same. You have 2 daughters. I now have 2 daughters.
3 daughters.
Oh, you do? See, there we go. But you have all daughters.
There are all daughters. Yes.
So I'm a daughter. You know, you're either a girl maker or a boy maker. Apparently, we're girl makers. And I don't know. So, but anyway, I felt like I could relate to a lot of the things that you had to say. I don't want to give away too much because typically I've had some authors on the show before, and what happens is I just like to go into the book and just tell everything about it, and unfortunately, then people don't need to buy it.
Right.
So I figure you have it teed up. Why don't you give us sort of, you know, what the book is about and why you wanted to write it?
Well, when I first decided to write a book, I had been writing about running for about 6 or 7 years at that point for Runner's World, and thought I had come up with a bunch of interesting thoughts about it. And then soon after I signed the contract to write the book, there were a number of explosions. One, of course, was the Boston Marathon in 2013. I had just crossed the finish line that interesting day.
Yeah.
And the other one, of course, was my family. My marriage came apart, and I had hoped it would be an amicable and casualty-less divorce. It was not. And I ended up dealing with both of those things in various ways. And so the book became about that as much as, you know, a how-to or why-to book about running. So it's a little bit about running through a crisis, but it's also about what I learned via running and how that helped me get through both of those things. I mean, in one case, I literally ran past a disaster. In the other case, I metaphorically ran through one.
Yeah, and you know, we've had a couple of guests on the show that actually were there that day as well, and it was.
Did you say you were there as well?
I was not, but we've had guests on the show.
Oh, I see.
Who were there? One was watching. Laura Stebbins was watching and was right nearby. I believe the first explosion, and I had another one who Jen Bergstrom was actually running down Com Ave, I believe, right. You know, before she making the 2 turns.
Yeah.
And so she didn't get to finish, but was pretty darn close. But what an incredible day. And, you know, even it's interesting that you sort of bring up both your divorce and the bombing, because for me, when I lived in Boston for a number of years, never got to run the marathon, only started running myself in 2014. And when the bombing hit, I pulled out my sneakers for the first time ever. And I was like, you know, I wanted to run that next year's race, which you did as well.
Yes.
But I never really made it. I never really got into the training after that, it just kind of like fell by the wayside until sort of the end of that year, when I went through my own divorce, and that so similar. And I want to say that I think it's very tactful the way that you went about telling this story, because I've tried to start writing a book about running and how I dealt with my divorce and running, and it's very difficult to write the story when you have children. And and there's so many details that you sort of want to say to make it interesting and it'll help people relate to your story. And I can almost sense that you wanted to push more of that narrative out there, but yet you were holding back because you do have to protect your kids.
You do have to protect your kids, and that is something that I grappled with. You're correct in that there was more I wanted to tell. In fact, there are early versions of the book in which I told a lot more. And I ended up not doing that for two primary reasons. The first reason is, as you say, one of the tragedies of my divorce is that it involved 3 children. They were children at the time. Now 2 of them are over 18. And they deserve privacy, and they have been in the center of too much conflict already, none of which I had wanted, but nonetheless it happened. And to write a book in which I were to talk about what happened involving them, even if I didn't blame them for anything, and I don't, would once again drag them into the middle of a fight, but in a public way. And they neither need nor deserve that. I think that, it would be in a weird way re-victimizing them again for me to talk openly about what happened. And the second reason is, frankly, and I don't know if you've had this experience, nobody wants to hear about it. I have been through a terrible divorce in which I felt wronged, and I can't stand listening to my friends tell me about their terrible divorces in which they were wronged. So I can't imagine that the general public would want to hear a lot of whining, frankly. And that's something that I think is a problem, because I think there are people in our situation who have stories that we want to tell, but they're stories that are hard to tell and they're hard to listen to. Those of us who have survived these things or are dealing with it are basically trauma victims. And the trauma that occurred to us is going to be really, really central to us. But it's very hard for other people to see into that. Experiencing the trauma is one thing. Trying to make it valuable and relevant to other people is a much bigger challenge, and something that has to be handled very carefully. And I didn't want to wear down my readers' patience.
Right.
If I said to somebody, "Hey, read my book. It's 200 pages about how miserable my divorce was," I think I'd be able to, make a new wing of my house just by stacking the books as bricks.
Right. But it is a balancing act, because you also, I think, you're also trying to get across a point that you, for you, it sounded like you were a runner beforehand. It wasn't like you just all of a sudden became a runner when you got divorced. It seems like it picked up. You got really involved and sort of sank yourself into it.
I think in retrospect, the fact that my serious interest in running occurred around the same time as my marriage began its final decline is not a coincidence.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't aware of it at the time. If somebody had said to me, back in 2007, 2008, "Peter, why are you spending so much time running?" I would have talked to you about my ambitions and how much I loved it, and how I wanted to qualify for Boston or set a PR or whatever it might have been. In retrospect, I think I needed a way of getting out of the house. Certainly, I remember a lot of runs where I was working through some stuff that was happening back in the house. And it was probably a good idea. I was saying those things out loud to the air rather than out loud to my then wife.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, that's something I can totally relate with. And even though a lot of times it didn't seem like it was explicitly written in the book, and not necessarily that I was looking for it, it was something that I could, almost read between the lines and feel, which I thought the way you did it, it was, the way, I guess I'm trying to look for the right word. I guess classy. I'm going to say it's classy, because
thank you.
The dirty laundry is not out there, and yet you were able to convey the point that, and I recognize how difficult that is, because it's not as easy as you made it seem.
Yeah, it isn't easy. And, I myself have never read a memoir about divorce that made me glad I read it.
Yeah.
So if people come away from this book happy they read it, then I think I've done my job.
Yeah, and in that case, you're not. Even though I felt like you and I had a lot of parallels when I was reading this book, you didn't write this book necessarily for divorcees exactly like you who are into running.
No.
It seems like, obviously there's a broader audience here. And within this book, you tell a lot of great stories. And again, I don't really necessarily want to get into the details, of them because then, people won't read the book, but, a lot of, just the general ones about you running the Boston Marathon with people who are blind and can't see. I think that's an amazing thing that you can go and do something like that, like at an event that takes so much energy to complete a marathon and yet be so selfless to do it for the sheer reason of helping someone else finish. I just felt like these moments that, there were two of them. What a great, sort of like tearjerker, heartfelt moment. And even though you were doing it for someone else, it seemed that the sport of running was doing something for you as well. Like this was your way.
Oh Lord, yeah.
And
I'll even go even further. I mean, the sport of running was doing a lot for me, as I describe in the book, but specifically the act of guiding a blind runner did a lot for me. One of the things, I have a lot of advice to people about what I think has helped me and could help them, people being people. But one thing that I should have been more explicit about is if you are feeling down, if you are feeling trapped in your own problems, as real as those problems may be, and sometimes the problems are very real, one of the things that will help you tremendously is finding somebody else who needs help and helping that person. And we do a lot of good in this world. We donate money. We go to fundraisers. We do matching grants. Some of us who have done well can, help people out with their checkbooks, and that's awesome. But there's something about actually meeting a person who needs help, whatever that may be, tutoring, helping them shop, helping them get around, or in my case, guiding a marathon, that does wonders for you, the helper. Because there's something about, well, frankly, giving that gets you out of your own head and your own worries and your own problems. And instead you can focus on somebody else's problems and help them. Because one thing we all know is our problems are insoluble, right? Whatever is driving us crazy, we can't fix. But another person's problems, those seem so easy. All they have to do is do this. So solving a problem when your own problems seem insoluble is one of the best forms of self-help you can perform.
Right. And I think, I think that's a great way to put it. I think, and the way you convey it in the book, it almost, it's almost like running comes full circle for you, as in, it had given so much to you when you needed it with with going through the divorce and all that. And then, and obviously all the accolades from just qualifying for Boston. I'm nowhere near that. So I can't imagine, what it must feel like to get into running, qualify for Boston, run the Boston Marathon. Those are like pipe dreams for me. And then to be able to give back in the way that you do by running as a guide for the blind, and then to experience that kind of like joy of it, where someone else's joy that you get to sort of feed off of. It seems like it just came full circle for you. And it's just, I think, that's really, I think for me, when I come away from your book, that's what I'm going to remember.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you do, because I think I hopefully, despite some of the things that happened to me, I hope I have a message of hope and encouragement for people who read the book.
Yeah, I think you do, and I think you talk about why you wrote the book and sort of the backdrop of the book, but my sense was there was one moment in there where you talk. I want to say that you briefly mentioned sort of being a salesperson or something about being like. I don't know, almost like you're selling the sport of running.
Yeah, I was a salesperson, I'm terrible at sales. I'm terrible at convincing other people to do things. I'm not a natural evangelist.
And yet,
need more
but yet this book was written for everyone. This book was written
I do think that. I know there are a lot of runners out there, and if people who don't run or would never think of running, I hope that they have something that they can get out of it.
Yeah, and it's not like a forceful, you should run, it's sort of a suggestive, hey, if you have problems, maybe want to try running,
Yeah.
And I think that's the way it comes.
Or even if you don't, frankly, I think that I don't want to be overly broad. This is why I'm not a good evangelist. I don't want to overpromise. Running will not solve your problems. However, it will make them more manageable. It will help you. It will solve problems you don't know you have. For example, maybe one of your problems is you don't get enough exercise, and therefore you're suffering from that Western disease of heading toward an early grave and heart disease and high blood pressure. Running will help alleviate that. But running will also help people in terms of their mental problems. I think that we all spend way too much time staring at screens and getting input of 1,000 kinds, so our own brains can't even function as they were meant to do. One of the things that I've been mentioning a lot, I wish I'd thought of it in time for the book, is I grew up reading Kurt Vonnegut, huge fan of his, and he has a short story called Harrison Bergeron, in which he imagines a dystopian future in which this sort of hyper-communist socialist government wants everyone to be equal, so everybody has a handicap that makes up for whatever strength they might have. If they're literally strong, then they have to carry weights around all the time. If they're quick, their legs get chained together so they can only shuffle. And the lead character of the story, Harrison Bergeron, is really, really smart. And his handicap is he has these headphones that he has to wear at all times that have this loud, random noise blasting into his ears every minute or so. So he can never have a coherent thought. And I think that even Vonnegut never would have imagined that would come true, but it wouldn't be the government forcing us to keep ourselves from having more than 2 minutes of coherent thinking. It would be ourselves. We'd all voluntarily do it. And I think that's bad. I think people have been alienated from their own minds. And one of the nice things about running is if you leave the headphones behind, you can get out and exercise and and finally find out what your own subconscious has to say to you.
Yeah, it's very primal. I find the act of running. It's very, there's nothing necessary to do it. I mean, theoretically, you wouldn't even need sneakers to go out and run. But
sneakers are usually. What I say is you don't need anything but a decent pair of shoes. Everything else is what's the word? Optional.
Yeah, and then there's this.
But you don't need any of it. Some of them are nice, like some shirts are better than other shirts, and some shorts are more comfortable than others. But anybody has what they need right now to start running.
Exactly. And I think, like I said, it's very primal for me when I do it. It's like I'm just, you sweat, you breathe heavy, you go as far as you want, you push yourself, you don't push yourself. It's just there's no one to judge.
Right.
So it's just you and yourself, and I think that's kind of what makes it a great sport. You actually, and I hadn't planned on asking you this, but you did mention in the book too that the one thing that's interesting about this sport is that sort of the best people who do it, the people who win the big marathons, like they're sort of anonymous.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
And it's kind of crazy because we know LeBron James, and we know the best baseball, football. We know all those guys, but we don't know the best runners, which would seem to be the most basic athletic activity that we have.
Yeah, it's weird on a number of levels. First of all, I believe running is the most popular participatory sport in America, i.e. more people run than, say, play baseball or basketball or play golf, even though those people who play golf and play basketball and play baseball all know all about the most impressive people in their sports, right? Like every golfer knows who Tiger Woods is or Ernie Els or whatever. And despite that, we runners generally don't know who the best runners are in the country or in the world at any time of year, which again is weird. And the other weird thing about it is that unlike baseball players and golfers and basketball players, we actually get to compete with the elites. I myself have raced Meb Keflezighi twice.
You have?
In 2009 New York and 2014 Boston. And I mean, of course, I wasn't challenging him, but I mean, it's amazing that we actually get to do these events with these elites. And yet at the same time, most of us have no idea who they even are.
Yeah, I feel like the sort of the anonymity, am I saying it right? Anonymity of the sport is sort of tragic in a way because it just, I don't know, I just feel like it should get more attention than it does. And it does.
And I actually I did an article for Runner's World about this once because I was really curious about it. Like, why doesn't anybody know who these people are? And I talked to somebody at U.S. Track and Field who have, the most incentives to publicize these people, just in the same way that, the PGA has an incentive to publicize professional golfers. And their explanation was an interesting one that I've come around to believe in, is that golfers play golf to win, right? They want to win their round, they want to win their club tournament, and thus they want to get a low score, and thus they are very interested in those people who are very good at that, right? I mean, if you really want to appreciate how hard it is to shoot a 65 in a golf round, go out there and try it yourself. But runners, according to this people, we're not that much into the competition, even though some of us get very obsessive about our time. Runners are more interested in the community event, in being part of a running group, or running and completing a 5K or 10K. And thus, because our emphasis, generally speaking, is not on fast times and winning competitions, we just don't care as much about the people who do, in fact, devote themselves to those things.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's a theory.
No, I do like that. Now, you also dabbled in triathlon a little bit.
I did. I might do it again someday.
Oh, all right. So how far did you actually get into that sport? Now, I know you talk about you talked about doing some sort of cross training, swimming and biking, and I know you had an accident biking. Was that the end of your triathlon career? Or
No, it wasn't. In fact, I did at least one triathlon afterwards. What happened to my triathlon career was that basically in 2011, I just devoted myself to running all the time, to really increasing my running performance. And so I stopped going to the gym and I stopped swimming as much. Although I recently started it again, and I remembered how much I enjoy it. And so this summer, depending on how my cross training goes, I might try another Olympic distance triathlon.
I think that's great. And a lot of our listeners actually have gone. I myself have gone into triathlon a lot. For some reason, I just love it. I love the cross training aspect. I love all that.
Triathlons are great fun, and the cross training is great for you. The atmosphere around triathlons is different in fun ways from running. And of course, let's not neglect the best thing about triathlon. There's lots of fun stuff you can buy.
Oh God, there sure is. I just had my bike refit. I can't even tell you how much that costs. It's like,
oh, I know, it's insane. I mean, let's face it. One of the problems with running is there's not enough stuff to buy.
Right.
When it comes to triathlons, there's an infinite amount of stuff to buy.
And I do have a theory about that. One of my theories is when I'm not really motivated, feeling motivated, sometimes I just go out and buy a whole lot of stuff, and I consider it an investment in myself, and then I feel bad if I don't use the stuff.
I know. Well, that's pernicious. One of the things I argue against is this whole sort of fitness industrial complex. All these people and companies who want you to believe that in order to become fit, you have to purchase their product or service. And, none of that is true. That's one of the great things about running is, again, with the exception of a decent pair of shoes, you don't need anything. And that, I think, is maybe kind of a blow in the face of the whole, capitalist system. So I one of the reasons I love running is you don't have to buy stuff. On the other hand, buying stuff is fun. Let's face it.
So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here, Peter. I know you got some other things that you need to get done. I do want to share with you my one critique of your book.
By all means.
And I actually have one more, but I'm not going to actually mention that today. But the one major one is this: you're sort of my age, and you misspelled Michelle Pfeiffer.
I did.
There's no P in front of the F.
I feel terrible about that.
How did someone my age? I mean, we grew up with Michelle Pfeiffer.
Because I went through a ridiculous amount of copy editing, and I'm amazed that not only did I screw it up, but everybody I was working with screwed it up.
It's a whole bunch of middle-aged men. I mean, now she was like our wheelhouse.
Yeah, I know. You'd think.
Well, listen, I want to, and just the last thing I wanted to mention. My wife went into labor last Monday night. I took your book with me. I sat up all night reading it. And one of the things about writing a book that I think sort of unsung, sort of maybe something that you don't think about when you go ahead and write it. I think that whenever I think about the birth of my daughter, there's always going to be that one little part that's going to remember the book that I was reading all night long for 2 nights. And I'm serious. Because, I'm going to see the book on the shelf and it's going to remind me of those 2 nights that it's just sort of, kind of like, and just to share that with you, because I know like when you write a book, it's like, you don't really realize that you're making an impact, but there's
Yeah.
kind of weird, strange impacts that you make along the way, I guess, you know?
Well, I hope someday you can give your tattered copy to your
It's
daughter.
tattered. Yeah, I certainly will. I certainly will. But listen, thank you so much.
Your blood. Anyway,
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Love the book. I'm going to post a link to it over on our website. And thanks for coming on.
my pleasure, Scott. Thank you.
All right. With that, we're going to look forward to next week. We got a couple. I got like 3 or 4 different guests that I'm contemplating bringing on the next few weeks. Maybe I'll compress them and do a bunch of shows in the next couple of weeks. So I'm not even going to mention or preview those. And until then, always remember, when it comes to running, I'm no expert. I'm just ordinary.